Hey, Science Peeps, it's Miss CG. Today we are going to do part 2 of Chapter 3, Lesson 1. So, yesterday we only did half of Chapter 3, Lesson 1. Genetics has a lot of new vocabulary, it's a lot of heavy material, so that's why I'm splitting up this lesson. Okay, so we're going to go to our Baby Bloops page. We're going to click on this right here, the first link. Okay, and it's the same hyperdoc. Okay, it's a 2-day hyperdoc. So we click on that. So yesterday you should have done part 1. You watched the walkthrough. We did pages 74 through 76. Okay, you watched these videos and did your ed puzzle on heredity. So now it's time for part 2. So we are going to be reading pages 77 through 79 and answering these activities. So do them along with me. You also have today another ed puzzle talking about dominant and recessive alleles. 2 new vocab words for today. And then there's a 2-question activity at the end of our doc for today. So why don't we go there? Okay, so this is what it should look like for you. Have all these documents. It's this one, chapter 3, lesson 1, and you can see here it says part 2. And what does the father look like? So that is the lesson that you're looking for, or the activity that you're looking for. Okay, part 2. All right, so let's take a look at our workbook. Okay, so we're on page 77 of the workbook. So we're going to continue talking about Mendel's research and the things that he was discovering. So scientists use the word gene to describe the factors that control a trait. Okay, so certain genes control certain traits. You have genes for eye color, genes for hair color, genes for height, countless genes. Now, alleles are different forms of that gene. So you can have an allele for, so there's a gene for eye color. The different forms of that gene would be a blue eye allele, a gray eye allele, a green eye allele, a brown eye allele. Okay, so there's different kinds of those genes, and those are called alleles. So that's why we all look different. You have a gene for hair color, but now there's different alleles that are for that gene. So you might there are alleles for brown hair, blonde hair, in between that color hair, red hair, all kinds of color hair. Okay, so the gene that controls the stem height in peas had one allele for the tall stem and one for the short stem. Each pea plant inherits 2 alleles from the egg and the other from the sperm. So we get a mixture of both of our parents, okay? And that's why we all look so different, because it's just that combination of alleles that we get from our parents, and there's countless numbers of combinations that could happen. So that's why our siblings, we look similar, but not exactly the same, because we have similar alleles, but there's different combinations. So we might have the same allele for hair color, but a different one for eye color, just like my boys. Both my boys have the same hair color, but my oldest has blue eyes and my youngest has brown eyes. So their father has blue eyes and I have brown eyes. So brothers, but they have different eye color. So a plant may inherit 2 alleles for tall, 2 alleles for short, or one of each, one tall, one short allele. Now, this is where we find out which allele do we see. So what if you inherited allele that was one for like you were a pea plant and you inherited a tall and a short gene, okay? Which one is going to show up in you? So an organism's traits are controlled by the alleles it inherits from its parents. Some alleles are dominant, while other alleles are recessive. So let's talk about these 2 words. A dominant allele is the one whose traits always show up in the organism. Okay, so it's the one that you see. The recessive allele is hidden. Okay, so if you inherit a dominant and a recessive allele, one from one parent, one from another parent, you're only going to see the dominant trait. So if being tall is the dominant trait for a pea plant, but now there's one of the parents that is short, and you inherit one tall and one short allele, you're going to be tall. However, in your genetics, even though you can't see it, that pea plant is going to have the short gene. Okay. So it can still pass on being short, a short pea plant, to the next generation. It just depends on now what combination of alleles that next generation gets. Okay. But whenever you have a dominant and a recessive allele, the dominant is the one that you always see. Okay, so let's take a look at this. This is our first activity. Here it says this is figure 3. Okay, so circle the picture of each dominant form of the trait in the parent, the P generation, and under what conditions would a recessive form of one of these traits reappear. So let's do this first part. So here in the parent generation, okay, we see a wrinkled seed and a round P. Okay, that's the seed shape. And remember, the F1 means the first. So these are all the offspring. And when Mendel did his work, he found that all the offspring showed the dominant trait. Okay, so now if you have one wrinkled and one round, and all the offspring are round, which one is the dominant trait? So we're going to circle this one, the round. So actually what we're going to do, we can't circle here in our activity. So what we're just going to do is we're going to write round. Okay, that's all you have to do. So let's go back. The next one, one parent has a yellow seed color and one has a green. All the offspring have yellow. So which is the dominant trait? Yellow. Okay, so let's go back. We're going to write yellow. Did I just say that wrong? No, I was right. Oh, Miss Gigi, you have a bad memory from 3 seconds ago. Okay. So next one, we have a pinched pod shape and a smooth pod shape. All the offspring in the F1 generation are smooth. So which one is dominant? So we're going to circle, if we had our books, the smooth one. Okay, so go to your here and write. Now, this isn't to say that this smooth, this yellow, this round plant, okay, for the offspring don't carry the recessive trait. They could be carrying the recessive trait, passing it on. Actually, they are carrying the recessive trait and they can pass it on to the next generation. And remember, Mendel said in the F2 generation, 3/4 of the offspring showed the dominant trait, 1/4 showed the recessive trait. Okay. So each plant had a 1 in 4 chance, what that means in the F2 generation, of showing the recessive trait. We're going to talk more about that. We're going to be talking about Punnett squares and probability, so you'll understand it better when we start talking about that. Okay, let's continue. Pod color. One parent is green, one parent has a yellow pod color, but all the offspring have green. So the dominant one is green. Purple flower, white flower, all the offspring are purple. So the dominant trait is purple. Okay, 2 more. We have, so the flower, the position of the flower. So for one parent, it's at the tip of the stem, and for another parent, it's on the side of the stem. Every offspring have flowers on the side of the stem. So which is the dominant trait? Side of the stem. One more. One parent is tall, one parent is short. Every offspring is tall. So the dominant trait is tall. Very good. All right, let's go on to the next activity. All right, so let's talk about this term hybrid. Okay, a hybrid is an organism that has 2 different alleles for a trait. So what that means is if you have the tall allele and the short allele, okay, what you're going to see is the tall, but you're carrying the allele for being short. All right, so that's called a hybrid. You're carrying both types of the gene, but the dominant one is the one that you will always see. Okay. Then a purebred would be one that only carries the tall gene or only carries the short gene. Okay. Doesn't have a combination of the two. Okay. So it says scientists who study genetics are called geneticists. Okay, so and they use letters to represent these alleles. When we do Punnett squares, if you've never heard of that before, I'm going to teach you how to do a Punnett square. We're going to be using these letters, these symbols, to help us represent the dominant alleles and the recessive alleles. The capital letter always stands for the dominant allele, the one that you see, the one that the trait that is expressed. And a lowercase is for the one that is not expressed. Okay. Now, unless the offspring has two T, so it inherits two short alleles from its parents, it's going to be short. This is a purebred. An offspring can inherit two tall alleles. So that's a purebred too, and that's going to be tall. And the offspring that inherit one capital and one lowercase, they're considered, this word here, a hybrid. They're still going to be tall because you see the dominant, but they can pass on that lowercase, that short gene to the next generation. All right, so let's take a look at here. We're going to fill in the missing allele symbol and descriptions. We're going to use the word bank there's the word bank, dominant and recessive words, to complete the statements. And then we're going to draw two possible ways the offspring could look. Okay, and so I'll show you how to draw today. So one parent, so P generation is tall, and that's a capital T. It's purebred. So really what you would see is capital T, capital T, but they're just giving you one letter just to simplify this. The other parent is a short P plant. It's a purebred. So really this would be lowercase c, lowercase t, okay? When we do Punnett squares, we'll be using two alleles for each parent, you'll see. So here in the F1 generation, the children, okay, we have a tall P plant. But this plant inherited one allele from one parent and one allele from the other parent. So all plants inherit one. So the words we're going to write here are it's inheriting one dominant allele and one recessive allele. And then these plants are tall. So the two words we're writing are dominant and recessive. So that's right here. We're going to do and recessive. I'm going to put a semicolon to represent that's the end of that first one, and we're going to move on to the next. All right, now here's the next box. So now we're going to talk about the next generation. So it's the grandchildren of these guys, the children of these guys. Okay. Plants may inherit two dominant alleles, and these plants are tall, right? Two capital T's, and that is tall. And then plants may inherit one. Actually, why don't we write that down? So two dominant alleles. Dominant. Okay. The next word we're going to fill in is plants may inherit one blank and one blank. So they can inherit one dominant and one recessive. They're still going to be tall because the dominant is what's expressed. So now the next one says plants may inherit two blank alleles and they're short. So if you inherit two recessive alleles, you're going to be short, but you have to have both recessive. So recessive. Now, what is in the F2? Okay, you don't even have to worry about drawing a picture for this box. What you would have drawn is what we did last class. You can draw three tall plants, one short plant, because 3/4 of them are going to be tall. 1/4 of them are going to show the recessive allele. But when we get into Punnett squares, you're going to understand why. It's going to explain in mathematics why. All right, let's move on to the next activity. Okay, we have the apply it. Fruit flies. In fruit flies, so why are they talking about fruit flies in college, in high school? Fruit flies are really easy to study genetics because they breed very quickly. They're easy to observe to certain traits. Some fruit flies are, here they're talking about long and short wings. The ones that I worked with in college, they were flightless. So some had no wings, and that was a recessive trait, and some had wings. And they also had red eyes and black eyes. So those were very, really easy traits that you could observe in the offspring. All right. So anyway, they're a real popular animal to do these genetics experiments with. So in fruit flies, long wings are dominant over short wings. A scientist crossed a purebred long-winged fruit fly and with a purebred short-winged fruit fly. So now we're going to be using capital W to represent the long wings, the dominant, and then write the symbol of the alleles for each parent. So if this parent is a purebred and has long wings, and this parent is a purebred and has short wings, the letters that we're going to use to represent for them are, so for the purebred dominant, capital W, capital W. For the purebred recessive, it'll be two lowercase w's. Okay. So number two, what will be the wing length of the F1 offspring? So think back to those pea plants. Okay, every pea plant displayed the dominant trait of the parent. Could they be carrying the recessive trait of the other parent? Absolutely. But all of them showed the dominant trait in the F1 generation. So the wing length of this F1 generation, they're all going to have long wings. Okay. You don't have to do number three. I'm still going to talk about it. It says if the scientist crosses a hybrid male F1 fruit fly with a hybrid female, what will their offspring look like? So what that means is if you had you don't have to write this down, but if you had a hybrid, so WW, capital W, lowercase w, capital W, lowercase w, okay, what would happen? And again, the same rule applies. 3/4 of them would be long winged, show the dominant, and 1/4 of the offspring would be have the recessive short wing trait. Okay. Again, when we do Punnett squares next lesson, you're going to really understand what all that means. All right, let's move on to the next activity. Oh, actually, was that it? Oh, we're down here. My bad. All right. So, assess your understanding. So we have these two questions left. So, why is a pea plant that is a hybrid for stem height tall? Okay, so we have a pea plant. It's a hybrid. So why is it tall? So it's again, you don't have to write this down, but maybe it will be capital T, lowercase t. It's a hybrid. And the reason is because the dominant trait, dominant allele, masks the recessive allele, okay, or recessive trait. Okay. Um, Next question. I think we've talked about that a lot. Can a short pea plant be a hybrid for the trait with seriously, can a short pea plant be a hybrid for the trait of stem height? Why or why not? So the answer to that is no, it can't. Okay, if it's short, it's going to be, you don't have to write this down, lowercase t, lowercase t. Okay, the only way you're going to be tall is if you have that capital T allele. Now you could be capital T, which is a purebred tall. You could be capital T lowercase t, which is a hybrid, but you're tall. But if you're two lowercase t's, you have the only recessive alleles. So no, because man only has right. Okay, there's no way genetically that you could be tall if you have two recessive short alleles. Okay, um, what you're going to do next, let me take you back here, okay, is watch this ed puzzle. It's really fun, and you're going to write your score. And then you're going to read an activity, and I'm going to go back to it. Okay, here's your ed puzzle. How many you get out of 3? And then down here, if we scroll down, there's an activity called What Does the Father Look Like? Okay, so it says members of a family typically share some physical characteristics. You know that. In this activity, you will use the concept to predict what the father of the kitten could look like. So here's the mommy cat, and here's her little kitten. Okay, so observe the appearance of the kitten. So this kitten is white, and then it just has some stripes on its tail and legs. Record the shading and pattern of the kitten's coat. Include as many details as you can. It's okay. We just described it. Look at the mother. Observe the recordings of the mother. Record that. Well, let's just talk about it. You don't have to record it. So she has some white paws, but for the most part, she's striped. Okay. So I see some traits of this kitten from the mom, the stripes on its legs and tail. So now it says, based on your observations, describe what you think the father might look like. So what do you think? Do you think the father is, I don't know, where did this kitten get that white color from? That's my hint to you. Okay. So could it have gotten that white color from dad? Hint, hint. Okay. So write your answer there. So now the next question says, so this is just one kitten. This kitten has siblings. Do you think all the kittens of the mother cat in the illustration and the father cat you have proposed in question 1 would look like the kitten show? Do you think that the other siblings, the other kittens, look just like that kitten? Are they identical to that kitten? Explain your answer. So I'm going to tell you right now, no, because look at you. If you have siblings, unless you're a twin, look at your siblings. Do you guys look identical? But do you have similar traits? Okay. So think about that question. Would they look exactly the same? Or would they look different? There could be all kinds of combinations. Remember, we're not seeing the recessive in this cat, the recessive in the dad cat. What if all the recessive traits come up in one of the offspring? For me, for example, I'm left-handed. I'm both, but I write left-handed. All of my sisters write right-handed. So left-handed is recessive. It's not dominant. So I got that recessive trait. They didn't get that. All right, so that's all I have for you today. Next class, we're going to be doing Punnett squares. They're really fun, and it's really important that you pay attention to those Punnett squares because they're going to be part of your last test grade coming up at the end of this marking period. Okay, so remember to join me for our live lessons. Let me go back over that. So for May 14th, I'm going to see period 6 at 10, period 8, 9. I'm going to see you at 10:40 and 12:30. Okay. And then May 15th, we're going to have a win period. So just please keep in mind for win, period 2, 3, we're going to meet at 10 a.m. Period 5, 6, we're going to meet at 11 a.m. And then period 8, 9, we're going to meet at 12. I wrote 12 a.m. You better not meet me at 12 a.m. 12 p.m. Okay. I was just AM crazy there. Okay. So I will send out those invitations. But of course, feel free to join if you have questions on Friday for WIN. Just because I don't send you an invitation doesn't mean you can't join. You absolutely can join. It's always the same link at the top of that Baby Bloops page. Okay. That's all I have. I'm here for questions. I'm missing you guys. Have fun with genetics. CG out.